process of switching up routines. And we've had members of the think tank who are coming up with, said that they are dusting off, poetry writing skills, or even if it's
Right.
journaling. So that's coming at you. And as soon as we
Okay.
get this live here.
Still working on it.
You're good, Josh.
Yeah. And then when we do the podcast version of this, we can just edit all this space out too. So
For sure.
that's
All
what's
that
cool
dead
about
air.
this. There we go.
Cool.
All right, now we're live again. It says we're live again. So okay. I feel there was another question I wanted to ask Matt before we move on. Who's an artist and an activist that you look up to? And like, let me articulate that a little bit, because like, as artists, we all have that. Like, if I could show my desktop right now, it's a picture of William Gaddis, the great novelist.
Right.
Yeah. So who's an artist that makes you do that?
Probably more writers than artists. Huge fan of Douglas Copeland. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. He wrote a book called Generation X, which for my generation just defined, our lack of our lack of regard for capitalism and the whole imbalance between the rich and the poor. Like, he was definitely someone who opened my eyes a lot to my own entitlement and, our entitlement as a country and just all sorts of things. He's a Canadian, but he lived in the US for quite a while. I definitely recommend him. I'm a big fan of storytelling. I think storytelling is how we create a new mythology that's not necessarily, based in religion or it's a way for us to get away from all the old stories that are so limiting sometimes in their capacities and create new stories that are more all inclusive and that we can all coexist in equally, without an us them mentality. And I try to stay away from the us them mentality. I'm usually a lot more of a reader and a writer. I just started painting about 3.5 years ago. So taking things to a visual level is a big deal for me, because it's almost like self-analysis. I can read something and relate to it, but to see a picture, Alan Schwartz, like his stuff affects me in a way that I can't even define, like literalize. Like, I can't put it in words, but it affects me. I was telling him the other day, like on a visceral level, like it just touches me, and I'm trying to reconcile that part of myself on canvas. I'm not there yet, but I'm trying to be more honest about myself on canvas, just kind of let it all out. And painting's been good for me for that way, because I know with writing I tend to get a lot more analytical and a lot more in the weeds with stuff, whereas with painting I can just kind of, let it be. Oh, that's pretty, I like that together. Just kind of flow and not be so like caught up here. So but yeah, Joseph Campbell is a huge hero of mine. And he wrote The Power of Myth with Bill Moyers. If you guys aren't familiar with him, I definitely recommend. But his whole premise, his whole life, he just passed in the 90s, was to take every religion, even story, mythology out there, and to show their common denominator. And greatest really, the greatest story he ever told was how the golden rule is inherent in every single religion that's ever been made by man. The golden rule, like to do unto others as you would have done unto you, or whichever. You call it empathy, karma. He just talks about how that is our defining core. So I work from that. And it's easier for me to paint that idea than to write it. Like I said, I get caught in the weeds.
No, that's good. Like, I really appreciate how you also brought up, as you were talking about your influences, I think you mentioned kind of, I maybe I'm projecting too much, but have you probably read some David Foster Wallace, right?
I may have.
Okay.
Yeah.
But
Unless I like was obsessed by him, I won't remember his name. But I do.
yeah,
I read constantly, so I'm not sure.
yeah, no, I went through a phase, and he was a big Gen X writer, and you were talking about that apathy towards, yeah, capitalism's destroying the planet, but so what? We're satisfied with what we can get in the supermarket and what we see when we turn on the TV.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, no, sorry, that just it's when artists talk, we kind of just start drawing connections between these things. So,
Right.
does anyone have any? I don't want to hold up the conversation. Does anyone have any questions for Matt?
I
Ivana?
do. Yeah. So Matt, I know you said that you started painting around March 15th. And so I think the date is very relevant just because I remember everything shutting down around that date. And
Yeah.
so I think it was hard for many of us to actually even grasp the day by day, And so you as a painter, painting that exact, how long it took, what was the biggest challenge for you, and in reality and also through the painting?
It wasn't a challenge to find the time to do it. The challenge for me, it's the largest piece I've ever done. In fact, I'm going to walk over to it right now and just show you how big this thing is. But can you guys, like, it's a
Yeah.
large size movie poster. You know what I mean? So like, that's a lot of like detail and a lot of getting in there. So it's I've never challenged myself to something that big before. And I felt like the writing was on the wall for me. I wait tables for money, and I could see it coming 2 weeks beforehand. You can kind of sense the zeitgeist of the public because the business is reflected, and it was just slowing down drastically. I could tell people were scared. So once we were shut down, I knew I had a lot of time, and so I wanted to find something big and bold and make a big and bold statement. But the challenge I have is I usually, I don't, even though my heroes write big, beautiful stories, I tend to be on a personal level, more intimate. In fact, I'm going to show you one more painting. This is the first, I did this while I was doing the other one. I usually work on 2 or 3 at the same time, but this is called The Last Kiss. Can you guys see it?
That's pretty cool.
It's basically, hold on. It's basically someone saying goodbye to their loved one through a window. Because I was thinking of that, how horrible, that this disease, these people are dying alone. And I pictured a kiss on a piece of glass. And that's usually where I come from. I tend to put out the problem. I project my problem and I work through it by literally visualizing the sorrow or the trouble or the problem. So this larger piece was me trying to find the positive in the situation. And the only positive I could find is that maybe this is going to give us a new consciousness towards our planet. We really have, this is a huge example, a huge indicator of what this planet is capable of when we're not mucking it about,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it really affected me, seeing the Venice canals clear and just stuff. I lived in LA, and seeing LA without smog is surreal. I lived in New York City and you get the craziest sunrises ever because of the pollution, and it's clear. It's pretty wild. That's been the biggest. I mean, people die. We do it every day. That's nothing new. But the biggest thing, the most profound thing that happened out of this whole pandemic is just recognizing what this planet is capable of without us, sadly. And so, yeah, I don't know. Hopefully it's a wake up. That's why it's called A Mother's Timeout. That's the title of the painting. So mom's putting us in timeout. She gets the house clean.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Matt, thanks for sharing your painting with us. Thanks for sharing the other painting. That was really cool.
Yeah, thank you, Matt.
Yeah, you're doing a lot of great work.
I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, and I hope you'll stick around with us while we interview our other artists here.
I'm not going anywhere. Yeah.
Yeah. So go
You
ahead.
Salgado? What's your first name? I'm sorry.
Ivana.
Ivana?
Ivana, yes.
Okay, cool. I can only read the names, and you didn't put your first. So nice to meet you, Ivana. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Ivana. So on my screen, you're next. Is it cool if we hear your poem?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you, Ivana. Go ahead.
Actually, I'm wondering, Ivana, if you'll introduce yourself, just because I know that a few people have gotten on since the beginning, and so if you just tell us a little bit about who you are, and then get started as you feel good, if that's cool.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
Course. No problem. So I'm Ivana Salgado, and I basically write a lot about immigration because I am from Mexico, and basically immigration has been something that I've lived through my past 24 years. And so it is very personal to me, but it's something that I'm passionate about. And that's where all of my narrative nonfiction writing is. I did live in Ohio, and so that's where mostly I was able to find more of my voice and really reflect how immigration is important to me. So I did write a poem, and it's dedicated to like single parents as well as to street vendors who are actually struggling right now during this pandemic. And it's called "The Last Dozen of Roses Just for My Mother." I stand patiently waiting next to the 2 white buckets, roses peeking out from the top, hoping a car will stop at a red light and someone will ask me, "A cuánto?" I have dozen left. Behind me, through the glass window, my mother, wearing a black smock, cuts hair, tirelessly, all day long. Every once in a while, I glance back. She sees me, I see her. And then a couple approaches me and they ask, "¿Cuánto la docena?" "A 15. "Quiero la docena." "Señor, disculpe, pero no puedo venderle la docena, pero le puedo vender 11 rosas." I briefly tell the man that I can't sell the last dozen, but I can sell him 11 roses. We go back and forth as he's trying to convince this petite 6-year-old girl to sell him the last dozen. I stand firm with my offer, 11 or none. My mother realizes that I've been talking to this couple for a while and walks outside. "¿Qué pasa?" "Señora," he says, "es que su hija no me quiere vender la última docena." "Mami, es que yo ya no tendré más rosas que vender." I explain to my mother that if I sell the last dozen, I will not have more to sell. After a few minutes of arguing, she convinces me to sell the last dozen. The man smiles and walks on with his partner who holds the last dozen. We clean up and go inside the beauty salon. I sit there waiting and hoping that the day will end soon. I want to sell more roses tomorrow. For my mother, selling the last dozen meant ending the day early. For that man, it meant that he was doing me a favor of buying the last dozen. For me, it meant I wouldn't be working along the side of my mother and making enough money so one day I could buy her the last dozen of roses.
Wow, that was beautiful. That was it was like I'm sorry, I'm going for like the simplest articulation of this, but like a painting with words, like that's what a good poem really is. Wow. So what was the inspiration for this? I mean, I hope I'm not asking a silly question, but I have this image. You're definitely a narrative journalism student. You had a narrative all through that poem, just to, smooth, coherent structure and everything. So like, I want to know how long it took you to make, and I want to know just how. Just go ahead. I'm sorry.
Josh's socks got knocked off. Oh, it was an awesome poem on it. Thank you.
Yeah. So it's actually a moment that my mom and I laugh a lot all the time, just because I did used to sell roses with her when we came to the US. I came when I was 4, And so she is a cosmetologist, but oftentimes that as a single mother, that wasn't enough money to pay the bills and whatnot. So another thing she would do was making cheesecakes, and we will sell out on the streets. And the other thing was roses, you know. And so that's a specific moment that we often laugh about, just for the fact that I was very persistent about not selling that the last dozen, and so that's why I called it that way. But and I think right now, as I started writing in college, one of the biggest things is that oftentimes I used to not think about what was going on through my life into college, and I reflected, and I think for many of us, some moments are more dramatic than others, but it takes years to actually recognize that. And so even then, that poem was written a year ago, and it took I'm 24, so it took a while to actually realize why that moment was so important, and yet we laugh about it just because it is a silly moment, but it's so relevant even now.
Ivana, do you mind if I ask a question?
Oh yeah, of course.
Do you feel like he took away your purpose?
Sorry, can you repeat?
Do you feel like he was taking away your purpose because you no longer had anything to work with?
Yeah.
Like you didn't want to complete the job. You wanted the job to complete you almost, you know, to put you in tandem with your mom at the time, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's strange. I did the chiclet kids in Tijuana. They sell the little chicle gum.
Oh yes, yes. Uh-huh.
Yeah. I did a painting of one 2 days ago. Out of the blue, I was just doodling with paint and came up with like the little kids. I remember them coming out the door and they had the big eyes and these little boxes of gum, and we would buy them off of them. And the same, like you'd want to buy everything, you know, and just throw them some money as well. But I never thought of it from the perspective of the pride that child was getting from participating, you know. And that's beautiful. It's crazy what perspectives we can see when we share each other's art, you know. I would have thought the money was all the end all be all, but it was the purpose. Yeah, I like that a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ivana, I'm wondering, it's a moment that you shared with your mother. Have you read that poem to her, and does she how does she remember that moment? Like I'm curious about that conversation. It's such a crystalline experience from your end, but that's an interesting mother-daughter moment as well.
Yeah, so a lot of the writing I actually do is mostly bilingual.
Okay.
And most of the time it's like, I want to say 75% English and then 25% a bit of Spanish, just that I'm aware that some of the Spanish depthness in some words cannot be translated into English. So I always tend to keep it that way. And so when I usually write things like that, I remember writing that poem and it was close to Mother's Day last year. And so after writing it, I decided to translate that whole poem in Spanish. And I did actually give it to her during that moment. And I was in Texas just because I used to travel for my job a lot. And so for me, it was more of me mailing that poem to her and just reminding her of that connection, that even if I'm far away, I'm still working and I'm there for my family in those terms, because we are a very tight-knit family, and I'm often there and I do help them economically as well. So it's still something that's relevant to us.
Yeah, and I have one more question. And I'm wondering, so that's a poem that is a year old, but what connections are you seeing? You know, I'm sort of remembering where I was this time last year. I think that we all are, you know, sort of as Matt had said earlier, it's amazing how much can change. But I'm wondering what connections you see from that moment last year that you captured in this poem. And then what about it is resonating now, or is it resonating in a new way with the way that the world is changing around us so quickly? But I'm wondering about the context there.
Yeah, so I think now a lot of the things that I write now, I tend to realize of like how privileged I am now compared to back then. And I think that's when I usually write. Even when I travel, there are some places that I've been. I lived in El Paso a few months ago, and so it was a place where I was doing my immigration interview a few years ago, and so that moment in that place really made me realize everything that I went through in 1 week. And so those are moments that I'm like, when I'm traveling, I tend to realize, oh, this thing's happened to me, you know. And so, but I realize how much I've achieved as a person, and so it reminds me of everything that I've done personally and how much I've succeeded overall. But even now, when we're in this pandemic, I realize how I'm in a comfort zone in terms that I am not being affected personally, you know, and nor is my mom anymore. And I know if that would have been when I was 6, we would have been the people who probably we would most likely be homeless. And so if we were going through this pandemic. And so it just makes me realize even now I am very privileged at this moment, but it reminds me of all the street vendors, like I said, that are suffering, that probably had to shut down. Even when they had to sell roses on Mother's Day, there were not as many street vendors as usually, as many as we see in Chicago, just because Chicago, we see so many street vendors compared to Ohio. So I see my life changing throughout the years, but also recognizing my own privilege even now.
Yeah, and any other questions? Unmute yourself, Matt. Took away your talking privileges there. Sorry about that.
I was just curious if you're writing more fiction or autobiographical fiction. Like, have you thought of it? It sounds like you have a lot of life experience for a very young person. Do you put your story down on paper?
Yeah, I think right now I am working on something, mostly on a project that I've been looking at, working with my mom mostly, that I want to write on immigrant women, but one of the stories being told from my mom's perspective, and then focusing on other 11 immigrant women who are suffering through immigration, and actually trying to make a connection. So my goal is to actually all those 12 women to become friends, but at the same time being able to share their story, even if they're single or if they're not, but immigrating to America, and sharing those perspectives. And just for the fact that, you know, I am a woman and I value a lot of the things that my mom did for me. She never went to college. She doesn't speak English at all. But, and those are things that are often discriminated in the US. But I know how valuable that was for me to recognize. And even now, I did graduate from college, and I am in a better position, but oftentimes I think about everything she had to do in order for me to be in the state.
That's brilliant. Mm-hmm. Well, I'd love to read it.
Same, for sure.
I'd like to add something.
Go for it, Kyle.
If you don't mind. So I'd like to hop back a little bit back to your poem, that the point of view that you introduced, the audience that you highlighted, of these of people who right now in this time are probably not at their best. They're not being seen, and they're not being helped as the general population in America. I just think that this pandemic has put some things in perspective of not the individual citizen, but the individual human being, that at this time, at this fragile time, you have to understand that the infrastructure of America is very moldy. So this time we need to start doing work that we're doing right now, this grassroots, open mic. There's a few other things that you can get involved in to shift the power to the people, because it shouldn't be like that. There shouldn't be no worry for anybody in America, especially America. But it's just very disappointing to know that there are people out there in America at this time that are not being treated like mainstream Americans or the general population. but it does put some things in perspective that we are okay. We are breathing, so we need to make sure we are their voice when they're breathless right now. And I really did enjoy listening to your poem.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hey, Kyle, sorry, before we go, I want to check, see if there's any questions from the audience. Just so you know, Ivana, Regina says, you'll have to share with us when that book is put out. I would love to check that out too. Julie's loving the interaction here amongst all of us. She's enjoying this conversation. David B. Ruderman, he is a associate professor of English at OSU Newark and a member of the Newark think tank on poverty and one of the organizers of Justice. He said he loved the mixing of Spanish and English. So what is that it? Oh, and Leisha says, so beautiful, Ivana. We are so proud. Yeah, everyone loved the poem, Ivana. So thank you very much for sharing it with us. So any other questions before we move on to Kyle here? Because you were saying I think it's cool if we go ahead and jump over to Kyle. Okay, Kyle, what you were talking about there. Go ahead and introduce yourself for people just tuning in. Yeah, sorry, I'm rambling now.
Hello, my name is Kyle Johnson. I'm a senior in high school at Zanesville, Ohio. I'm on the Zanesville think tank on poverty. I'm a local organizer. I do a lot of organizing in a way that I bunch information and I present it. I present it to my Board of Education, to my faculty at the high school, and to many different civic organizations. Goes on from the Muskingum Foundation, Big Brothers and Big Sisters, Forever Dads. Just a lot of meetings this year of identifying and acknowledging and trying to be proactive. So that's a little bit about me. You want me to read my poem?
Yeah, no, I haven't heard any of or read any of your work yet, so I can't wait. Yeah, I'm really eager. Go for it.
I wrote this poem in 2018 after some things that happened within my family. A lot of it is not about me. It's a lot of point of view perspectives of people around me, people in my family, friends, and people in my city. It's called Young Man, if y'all can hear me. Young man, a legend. Stone cold, but not too cold, a beast. Light skin, people say, is the right skin, a menace. Black boy shot dead, no longer living. Mama told me stars should be the only thing shooting. They got targets on our head. These police go right ahead. Another dark figure missing, gone, vanished. Just listen. One day change gonna come, but the only change is the brother is no longer living. The prisons out here filling. Trump out here killing. Streets the only thing that we feeling. Trap house is a go. But oh no, drug dealing is the only thing that we know. So here goes. Another boy gone, house busted. Just listen. There's people out here snitching. System got us itching. Which way to go? You know it's prison or the kitchen. Unless you wake up, look something in the distance. Look back, it took resistance. Not the poetic kind ancestors had to get stitches. But instead, they ended up in ditches while their kids were stuck watching them lynches. Just listen. But what am I really saying? These kids out here paying. Received a gift as bad as a bullet with no name on it. Skin deep, people get so deep in their feelings. But who can blame them when a bullet shot their cousin dead right through the head? Just got me thinking. Which way should I go? People say white is always right, that the government is just right, just doesn't seem all right. Mama said stars. Mama said stars should be the only thing shooting. But just like the stars in the sky, too many to count. Another body on the ground seems just like another star in the sky. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle.
Wow, this is a great show. I'm so glad that you all are sharing your art, especially that was Kyle, incredible. So I want to open the floor for other folks to ask questions, so I'm not dominating this conversation, but
Yeah, I mean, so Kyle, I'm also wondering, I have seen that you just recently graduated. I really appreciated, I follow you on Facebook, and so I appreciated your graduation cap. Um, and I'm wondering if you can tell me a little bit about the um, the process of, what do I want to ask? I think the process of writing this in a moment where the context that you were talking about with Ivana, there is so much that is exacerbated by the injustice of this pandemic. And there's obviously a lot that you were pointing out has gotten worse, and especially for communities of color. We are doing this show in the shadow of, unfortunately, more unjust killings and murders by police in this country. And I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about the context and what sort of changes you're hoping come from performances like the one that you just gave us, because you're calling out some extremely important things boldly. And I'm wondering if you would share a little bit about that.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and start with, this poem is about income inequality. It's about poverty, the impact on specifically young African Americans in America. It really dives into, it dives into to people not being seen. This stuff goes on every single day. It goes on every day of his, and this poem directly speaks about a mother getting lost with Jesus. No, that's the wrong poem, sorry. It really, honestly, cultural change, systemic change is what needs to come out of this. Not just speaking up. I had a conversation with my sister earlier about how a lot of like starvation, poverty, and all these many disparities are byproducts within mainstream media in America. Like if you look at the like NBA, the NFL, and you look at all like this national things, they are pushed and people live for them, but they don't live for byproducts such as income inequality. How come we don't have any major platforms that are endorsed as much as people hidden heads or what, etc. The poem, it's not supposed to be a good poem. It's not supposed to be something that's positive and heart like warming. It introduces a mindset that something is coming out of this, that people need to prepare for a cultural change. Because we've been stuck in tradition within society. We have been living with things that have been normal, traditions in high school and in the city of regular things, but tradition doesn't work. If you look, as of 2019, the highest suicide rates amongst young Black LGBTQ youth. And this poem, it's about a young Black man, and it. Do you have any other questions? I don't know how well I answered that one.
Yeah. Can you hear me there? Okay, I'm not muted.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you said something that you articulate something that I felt for a long time, but I couldn't articulate it. I didn't have that ability. And that was that, this is art, but it's not for entertainment. This is about something more. right? I'm curious as, and this is a big question, but you know, you're making the exact kind of art that I personally feel that we need, you know, the art that really says, no, things are not great. This is not, you know, I noticed your shirt, Kyle, like, yeah, America was never great. And what I'm curious is, and sorry, like, again, this is a difficult question and it's hard to articulate, but how do we as artists, or how as an artist are you using your art to really kind of, you know, say that? I mean, does that make sense? Like, I hope I'm making sense here.
So a lot of young adults within Zanesville, the Tri-Valley area, and Ohio have like reached out to me. They enjoy my poetry because it sounds like rap. They think it's like rap music. They think that I'm a rapper, but it's spoken word, and it really does transcend generations. Like it outreaches to younger people, to younger adults, like that. Like you would be like 10-year-olds, kids in middle school that have like, I know who you are. It's just, I have several poems that are like that, so it can specifically try to so I can reach a younger audience, because I know that there's not necessarily a lot of kids that that use their gifts in this way, at least not where I'm from. Like the nearest slam poetry place is all the way in Cincinnati. I live in Zanesville. I can't get involved in those kinds of like button poetry and all that stuff. That stuff's like 2-3 hours away. I can't. But I try to make sure I can transcend generations, because there's a lot of adults that also enjoy my poetry as well.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't so much a question as much as a comment, but the work you're doing, I admire a lot. This was my first time seeing your work, and I'm floored. It's you know, you know, I'm a white pansexual guy in a 90% white area. I have a lot of privilege, and you know, the piece that I'm working on, which I'll share with you, is a little bit about that, about Newark Homeless Outreach. But back to your work, the effect was like a big punch in the face that I needed, like a slap in the face, like, Josh, wake up. You know, that was the effect that it had on me. So I really hope you'll come back and share your work, because it was really, really important to me today. Thank you.
I did have a question. So, Josh, Kyle, sorry, you talked about being, you know, in marginalized communities. So, I think one of the biggest, so I guess one of my biggest questions is like, as a person who maybe faces some things that, you know, are not, I think in the US, based on our skin color, and also we face the situations very differently than a white male. And so what's the biggest challenge for you when you write those poems and share it with people who probably don't share the same background as you do?
I would say how it impacts me, especially when I do several speaking engagements involving poetry, not like my presentations. I think it lies in the back of many people's heads, Like when I go and I'm doing a speaking engagement, or I would say like all my open mics, because I've done probably like 6 open mics, like physical open mics, not virtual open mics, in the past 2 years. When people see that stuff on Facebook, adults, people from that are leaders within the community, and when I do get invited to these speaking engagements, I think that there is a lot of not doubt, but like they have their eyes open and they are kind of tiptoed, like to say yes or no to me. But when they see that I have the statistics and I have the facts and I'm living this, then they have no choice. You sometimes have to break the door down. You don't have to ask to be let in. Like they can't turn me away. Like, also, this lifestyle that I wrote about, that I've seen, and in some of the wars I've been through, it's how that's impacted me. I remember when I was getting my license last year, I'm not even gonna say where, for driving school. There's only 2 driving schools within Zanesville. The driving instructor had scheduled to pick me up at my work because he said that my street was too dangerous to drive on. My street's like not even a little street. It's just, there's just known to be a lot of minorities that live there, like Black people. So this storyline, because it's the same story, just different people. That's what people have to understand. We have repeated history so many different ways you wouldn't believe, and that's probably that wraps that up. It's disappointing sometimes, the reaction you get. Like I don't know if I can speak on that. I'm a class officer of my senior class. I graduate. I think I graduate on Tuesday virtually. They're going to tape like 3 different videos or something. And I feel like there could be a setback on a lot of the things that I do, and involvement with myself, trying to get a lot of the kids involved with the community, because there is a dire need to start seeing and identifying and working for the underserved groups and students at my school and in my city. But that need has been like looked past because of, they know why. They have their prejudices and feel that way. But
so Kyle, you at the beginning of before reading, you spoke about all the organizations that you're working with, the number of different ways that you're fighting for justice in your community. I'm wondering too, if you would share just, and I know it's a big question and I know it's sort of off the cuff, but I'm wondering what your vision of racial justice and economic justice looks like for the people of Zanesville right now, and perhaps broader, whatever scale you'd like to talk about. But I know that you're a very powerful organizer and a youth organizer in Zanesville. Yeah, and I'm curious to hear your take.
My take would be, for advancement for any group, you have to look at overall advancement for everyone. Even if that means another group progresses further, which we have seen that through one of my favorite organizers and activists, Walter Rodney, from Guyana, South America. He was assassinated like 30 years ago. He worked with Angela Davis, and he was the organizer for underserved minorities where he lives. He had a quote that quotes, to leap forward while others slowly come behind is virtually equivalent to going backward. So as other people are like zooming further around the circle and others are gradually making their way, there's a gap that's being grown. And I'm afraid that the gap has exceeded. It's unmappable. It's created many different disparities and rigorous forms of just it's going to take everyone. It's going to take networking with churches and community centers, and it doesn't take one person. You have to get everyone on board. And the thing about it is, it's not to say that we're powerless. We're the most powerful people there is, anyone with a voice is. It's just about harnessing that power, and that's where everyone is at fault at. And especially with all these societal, I wouldn't say imbalances, but things that keep people from focusing on stuff that really matters, like social media and fake news and corrupt president. It has really thrown us through a loop. But to go back to your main question, because I kind of went out there.
No, you didn't. You didn't. That was all. Yeah, needs to be said. Thank you. Keep going.
I've been taking an American Lit class at Zane State this year, and a lot of my projects are based around like Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois, which are like polar opposites or whatever. And they are like Booker T. Washington believed in casting your bucket down and using the resources that are there. W.E.B. Du Bois believed in creating your own resources. He believed that Black people, they stepped in the sunlight and were freed only to go back to slavery in a different forms. My point is they both wanted the same goal of overall advancement, but they couldn't figure out how to get there. So I'm kind of right now working my way through all these different things as to how to do it. And I mean, it's cultural and societal. It's societal change. Like, it has to be enrooted within the school system. There needs to be maps designed and stuff, groups within our schools that work specifically for this kind of things and with older people. But a lot of that stuff doesn't like exist, and it's like up to us to design that kind of stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Kyle.
Can I just ask Kyle something?
Yeah, go for it, man.
First of all, congratulations on graduating. I'm sure we're going to see some pretty cool things coming out down the pipeline from you. I admire your confidence. You're extremely passionate and capable, and that's really important because your voice needs to be heard. And often, you're right, it's easy to go unheard, especially when you're young. But you got the delivery, you've got the vernacular, you've got skills, and I'm glad to see that you're using them for good. And all these systemic changes you're talking about, a lot of us want the same things. And I think that's what's great about us getting together like this, and being from all different corners, is hearing each other's stories and hearing each other's perspectives, because I can't create your perspective on my own. I need you to do that for me. And you do it well. And I just wanted to say thank you. That's it.
Thanks, Matt. So we're coming down to 7 o'clock. I'm okay. I just want to make sure I wasn't muted. It's about 7 o'clock now. I didn't write a nice big closing for this. I wasn't sure how to even close this out. Kellen, I'm not sure how you do. I don't really want to close it out, honestly, because this was such a moving conversation of hope, inspiration. It broadened my horizon a great deal, and it made me grateful that, I've stayed sober this long to live and enjoy all of your intellects.
And Josh, even before you close it all the way out, we actually have a next step. We wanted to invite all of our viewers really quick to our community listening session on, what are we doing this? I'm just copying and pasting the event into the chat. Sorry.
No, you're fine. Copy paste.
Yeah. So I'm hoping that link works. I think it will. In the comments right now, I've actually just attached a link to a community listening session that the Newark think tank on poverty is hosting on May 24th at 6 Eastern. It is going to be on Zoom, but you do not need a computer and you do not need an email address to join. And actually, if you have any questions about how to access that event, you can send us a message on the Think Tank Facebook page. And in a nutshell, there is so much community wisdom in regular people in Newark. Just our neighborhoods. And that wisdom deserves a seat at the table, a seat at the local decision-making table for things that affect all members of our community. And so we are inviting members of Newark community. This is not, unfortunately, for people who live in other places, although there's clearly awesome stuff going on in Zanesville, to a community listening session where we want to hear about the barriers that you and your neighbors are experiencing in this time of extreme stress in our communities, and the world's turning upside down, because we want to figure out how we can partner with regular people to make sure that voices get heard, and that regular people have their seat at the decision-making table in Newark. And so if you have questions about how to access that event, we'll be posting about it throughout the week. Or if you know someone who you'd like to bring, it'll be an hour-long call, or I'm sorry, I think it'll actually be a 90-minute call, excuse me, talking about Newark and people power. And so if you're interested in joining, yeah, please jump on. If you have questions about how to access it, shoot us a message or add in the comments. So that was the one thing that I did want to say before you wrapped up, Josh.
Yeah, no, and you know what? I decided we're not gonna wrap up. I'm just gonna keep you all trapped here, and we can talk art all night.
Nice.
No, because I mean, instead of me giving closing comments, I'm more interested in hearing what the artists have to say. So we'll go back through the order that we did. So we'll start with Matt. Any closing comments that Matt has for this evening and the viewers?
Mostly I just want to share my gratitude for this experience. Thank you for putting it together and having the technical know-how to make this happen. It's hard to find community right now. I know I've got some underlying health issues that's keeping me stay at home. So it's nice to be able to reach out and get that human touch. And like you said, the group knowledge is huge. And I think I've mentioned it a couple of times, but I really enjoy the different perspectives that I'm able to view on an intimate level, on a close situation, where I can get feedback and I can hear your voices. I hope everyone continues to create and continues to share. Some of the hardest parts about being an artist are putting it out there. Creating it's the fun part, the easy part, for me anyway. The hard part for me is to actually, put it out there in the world, and sometimes the world's not very nice. But it's a nice, safe place to be able to share my artwork, and I appreciate that. So thank you all.
Not a problem, Matt. And thanks for sharing your work with us, and I hope you stay safe out there. Ivana, what's up?
I thought this was really nice as well. Like I said, I'm in Chicago. And I think one of the things that I've been thinking the past few months is, with everything that's going on, and I think Kyle brought it up, so many marginalized communities from different backgrounds have been going through a lot. So oftentimes we see marches, protests, and just not being able to see that on Fridays when I would hear there was town halls or everything like that, we're not able to see that physically anymore, just because we're trying to be safe and not infect others. So I think this was a nice way to actually demonstrate how we can still talk about important issues. And so I appreciate, I think, their learning experience for today.
Thank you, Ivana. And I wish you and your family the best. Please be safe. Kyle.
I really have enjoyed this experience and hope to get invited back on here again. I would like to say that the work never stops, that you may be comfortable, but someone else is uncomfortable, and it's our job to try to make everyone comfortable, to make sure everyone isn't seen as just as a statistic, or people are weighed by their worth from economic class, and we need to make sure we give everyone a listening ear, a voice, excuse me. That's what our jobs are. If we have them, that's what we need to do. That's kind of what, that's my comments.
Thank you, Kyle. And be safe, for real. Everyone, these are scary times. You know, I grew up, if I could tell a story real quick before we close out, I grew up an incredibly shy, introverted child. And then in my mid to late 20s, I came to love crowds and such because of the Newark Think Tank on Poverty and how much love I've experienced through this group and the friends and comrades I've met. And now this pandemic has made it to where I'm actually afraid of crowds again. But you know, I've been out of work for 8 weeks, so to have this very human conversation with you all was important, and it's something I'll cherish. And those are my last comments. The most important thing is please be safe. A reminder for all of us, hopefully I don't come off like a parent, but you know, wash your hands and wear your masks. Kellen.
Thanks, Josh. No, that's it. That's all I got. We'll hope to see as many of you as we can on the 24th.
Yeah, for the
And
listening session.
Artists, y'all are welcome.
Yeah, please come to the listening session. Oh, hey, you know what? I keep forgetting things, but we have another Justice Cafe on the 30th. So we're planning that. We'll have more details come next Wednesday. And I think that's it. So, all right. I think we can all sign off. I think you all were, I can't thank you enough. You know, I want to see you all again, and I want to continue to experience your work. So,
yep, really.
See you
thank
next
y'all.
time, guys. Thank you.
Yep. Be safe, everyone.
Yep. Thank you for everyone who joined on Facebook.
Yeah, can't shout outs to the Facebook folks. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the meeting now.
Yeah, end it out.